And welcome back to The Truth in This Art, your source for conversations at the intersection of arts, culture, and community. I am your host, Rob Lee, and thank you so much for joining me today. And what you're joining me for is an exciting conversation with my next guest, an Asian American photographer, filmmaker, and designer whose work has been featured at prestigious festivals like Cannes, Sundance, and DOC NYC. Please welcome Jefferson Liu. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rob. Hello, everyone listening.
Thank you for coming on. And I must say, before I go into, the first sort of introductory thing, I like to get this out of the way. I'm jealous of your hair. As a man that's going bald, I have like my buddy calls it the Jason Statham stubble. That's what I got going on. You have a great head of hair. I'm jealous. I am so jealous right now.
Well, you definitely don't want to see me bald. Like, I keep this sort of fluffy thing just because I'm pretty sure there are bumps and weird things in there that nobody will ever want to see, including myself.
That's great. Me and my partner, we have a term that we call a floof off. And if you remember Batman 1989, this is a checking thing, right? It was Robert Wall and Michael Keaton. They were having an argument and both of their hairs was just teased up and levitating. So whenever I see floofy hair, I think Andrew Garfield, right? I just like, yeah, this is a lot.
Hey, that was the best Batman. So
you get it. You get it. So thank you for making the time to come on. And before we get into sort of the main topics, I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work, kind of like a little bit of that tease, if you will.
All right. Well, my name is Jefferson. I'm fairly new to Baltimore. So, and Baltimore was important to me because it sort of started my sort of mission or whatever you want to call it into creating things for myself. I still am fairly uncomfortable with the term artist and labeling myself that. But most of my life, I've been in the creative world, but very much in advertising. So think about TV spots, mainly like, car brands and a lot of video games, working on things like PlayStation and whatnot. And when I got to Baltimore, I would say that the current state of like how I was feeling was very, I'm a great manager, like I've gotten to this point in my career and, I can make good work happen, with a huge team and whatnot. And then, something about Baltimore challenged me or inspired me to really start making things on my own again. And, I was traditionally taught as a graphic designer and I didn't want to do that anymore. I felt like, my work, the advertising background and whatnot had taken something that I had passion for and turned it into a job. And so I wasn't really interested in another job. I didn't, I want to do something for myself, by myself, pretty much. So I got into photography and, a couple of things had happened in my life that really sort of gave me purpose or a concept to work around. Before that, I messed around with cameras and filmed some documentaries here and there. But I really, was like, okay, well, this is just something that's for pure art, less sort of blatant communication and whatnot. And that's where everything started. And that was about, 2 years ago. So it wasn't that long.
No, thank you. And definitely we're gonna tease through a few things in there because it's an interesting, like I hate the word journey, but I'll use it for simplicity here. It's an interesting journey when you have sort of this, I guess, awakening when you're doing something that feels like it's business, but it has a creative bent to it. But then it shifts into, this is fine. What is the other version of it? What is a version where I can kind of stretch those creative muscles? For a long time, I have tried to, do something creative. Like my background before podcast, almost concurrently was in marketing analytics. And, I started that sort of career in 2007 and started podcasting in 2009. So it's almost right there. But always in the day job, trying to find a way, I was keeping them separate, but trying to find a way to do something that satisfied this creative urge. And after kind of leaving that marketing job, going into higher ed, and there was an opportunity, ironically, with my current day job employer, but it was a sort of different time, where there was a podcasting opportunity that was sitting there. And at that point, I'd had almost 6 years of experience as a podcaster, self-taught, the
Mm,
whole thing, right?
right.
And I was just like, really, like, honestly, like, this is an attempt to bring both of those together. I do this, they're looking for this, and they just rejected it. They rejected the idea, they rejected the concept for a job that was sitting there, basically podcasting, marketing experience, higher ed. I was like, I have all three of these. And that was a period where I learned something where it's like it's best to keep them separate. It's best to kind of do your own thing. This is for me. The
Mm.
day job, if you will, is the funder. I like to look at it. And, I've kind of rode off of that over the last, 11 years since that sort of situation presented itself.
Well, yeah, journey's a good word for it. Whether you're on it or not, it just sort of happens to you.
Hmm. So you touched on photography, and I became aware of you because I always ask folks, send me a headshot. I always ask for that. And I interviewed Christina, and this is the second time I've interviewed Christina, and she was like, make sure you credit Jefferson. I was like, got you. So, and the visual, it's a dope visual. I might be reaching out to you for a later conversation about a later topic, hint, hint, wink, wink, point at the nose. But it struck me. It was like it was visually striking. There was some depth in there. It was a really just cool image. I'm not a photography guy, but it was a really cool image. Talk about sort of your view and developing sort of a striking image, or what would hit in that way. Like, I generally ask this question: what separates a good image from a bad image, or a great image from a not so great image? But what are your like thoughts on photography?
Yeah, there's it's an interesting art form, right? It's one where everybody does it now. We all have these amazing phones that take amazing images, and it's very accessible. It's not like back in the sort of early days where cameras are extremely rare and hard to use, and there was a barrier to entry. Now anybody is capable of taking a great shot. Like you give somebody a million shots, one or two of those are going to be phenomenal. But I think what that does, like with music, with filmmaking and whatnot, the accessibility, the prolification of that medium starts to challenge artists to do things in their own special way. For me, photography is very technical in a lot of ways. It's one of those things where you can easily get right and wrong with the cameras that we use. And that's just the sort of ground rules. And there's an artistry even in how you deal with the machine itself, the type of gear you work with, and whatnot. But then, what are you trying to say? And it's interesting, like with Christine and working with other artists. I feel like there's a different goal in mind with some of these other artists. Whether I am trying to reveal, especially with her, a truth, behind what she does. I know that I have one image to tell her story. So I think that's what I try to do. With some other, I work with a lot of musicians and bands and whatnot. And a lot of it is just, sometimes I'm not telling a truth. Sometimes I'm sort of hiding a lie. But ultimately, I think what binds everything together is the element of storytelling. I love photography in the sense that, like, video and writing and everything, you are able to build this story over a long period of time. With photography, it's very different. It is, you have milliseconds to tell a story. And I think that's what, kind of pulls me into the art form. Is just like, how am I going to use that time in a way wisely? Like, when somebody sees it, what am I communicating to them in that amount of time?
Yeah. No, that's great. It's a few gems in there. I like that. I like that. And I'll even say that you said it so long since an interview, but I even say with doing this podcast, as I was saying before we got started, and I even expand upon it. I don't look at this as the sort of end all profile on you or anyone that I interview. This is a moment in time. This is the archive, and sort of that consideration of it's like a couple of questions that I try to ask when I start off. What do I find interesting about this person? What am I curious about with this person? And that kind of informs sort of the questions I'm going to write and sort of the direction I'm trying to take the conversation. And but given it sort of that openness that I'm looking the truth in his art, right? I'm looking for something in there to add like the real conversation. But again, it's letting the guests really cook. It's about them. It's not about how I form a question. It's more so like, what is the answer that they have? What's the insight that they have? And framing it in the best way and trying to keep it as real as possible. Like, the conversation we'll have, you'll even get my spiel in the rapid fire portion. I always say, what I said is what I said. You know what I mean? So let's not overthink these things when it comes to rapid fire as an example and a distillation of sort of the authenticity is key.
Hmm.
So talk a little bit about techniques and tools. Like, I'll say when I'm recording this, I've used so many different stuff. Like some people are like, oh, I only record in GarageBand. I was like, I'm using Zoom right now. Or if I'm, in studio with someone, I'm using Audacity, which is a freeware. I have a microphone and I have a Zoom Prod Track 8 to give away all of the secrets that I use. But that's what my preference is. But I am capable of using sort of the Rode mics and all of these other things. And as a person, as I did some teaching last year, and I was going through different ways to record audio and record conversations, and it's like pick the right tool for the job. So, a PodTrack 8, I have 6 inputs. I can have 6 different guests on there, and it could be a really interesting conversation. I don't need that if I'm just me and let's say you, like in on site. So, it's kind of picking the right tools and picking the right mics and things of that nature. So for you specifically from photography, what do you like to shoot with? What is your preference? Talk about that.
Yeah. Wow. That's oddly enough, that's a complicated question. So I love gear. Like it doesn't matter if it's like bikes or computers or especially now cameras. I tend to go a little bit overboard when it comes to this stuff. Yeah, it's not a cheap hobby, but it's a combination of I say the latest and greatest when it comes to camera gear, and then I also have a pretty extensive collection of old like film cameras as well. So generally, I like '90s film cameras because it's right at the cusp where I feel like film cameras were at their pinnacle. Like they were starting to do really cool stuff with them. They were starting to become more automated in certain aspects. So I have a good amount of cameras there that I really like. And then more recently, I sort of devoted myself to medium format digital when it comes to, most of my portraits now. And then there's just something with that camera. It's impressive in all its specs, but the color range that it has, its ability to, somebody who shoots people, its ability to capture skin tone is amazing. So like, it's, what is it, trillions of colors that it can capture when it comes to people. So for me, that there's something really wonderful about having that latitude and the ability to adjust and whatnot. When it comes to lenses, which, arguably are just as important, I go with a very non-typical portrait lens. A lot of people like to shoot, with a fairly long lens and whatnot. I like to shoot with a wide lens just because it creates just the right amount of distortion. And you can see this when you like take your iPhone and you go to that 0.5 sort of lens. I like that distortion to a certain degree just because there's an element of weird that you kind of feel, but you don't really see. And I kind of want to hover around that area. I want there to be just a slight bit of a fantastical element without being completely overdone.
It's good. It's good. And it's bringing sort of your own style to it, but also being a gear person. You said gear, my inner geek was just like, he gets it.
It's dangerous. It's dangerous.
I can't show you the visual right now, but I'll take a picture of it and send it to you afterwards. I have I have this metal cabinet that I got from maybe the Container Store that at one point I was going to use for something else. I put it together Now, all of my recording gear, all of my field gear is in there on each shelf. And on top of it is all of my Ninja Turtle like action figures. It
Oh,
is
wow.
a visual. And
Oh,
I'm kind of building out the studio, and I was like, it's nerdy. I'm looking at it now. It's like cables and all types of different interfaces sitting in there. And I go through a la Batman. What do I need in my utility belt this week?
I finally got to the point where it was too much. So like now I'm literally like in the process of downsizing. I have this like one camera I'm gonna like focus on.
Yeah.
So that, I'll have like a very sort of selective group of lenses. I'm trying to like, because it's kind of daunting at times too, like I'm about to go on a shoot and I almost have too many options.
Mhm.
Again, a good problem to have, I guess, but like now I'm sort of changing my methodology a little bit. But yeah, like that closet it's a mess in there. There's so much stuff in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I almost want this to go out there into the ether. I just want one of these companies to sponsor me, you cowards. Zoom, hit your boy up and say, look, here's all of the gear you need.
Yeah.
Because
Fujifilm, I'm right here. I'm
Because literally, when a new piece of gear comes out, it's just like one, I'll make sure I'm knowledgeable on it, and then it's like, oh, I got to get that now. So it was this like little cube that was like, I think it's an F3. And it has like a 32 float, so it has a really really decent range on it. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get that. It's like when I got it, it was like $400. It's a little cube, and I was like, I don't even know what this is for. I was like, we'll figure it out. So when I travel, that is the smallest thing. Generally, I pride myself on maybe it's a photographer's approach, I suppose, but when I have my little bag, I put all my gear in a fanny pack. I'm able to have
oh,
like the little
yeah.
AirPods and I can connect that through the Bluetooth on the device, listen to the sound check, and I have lav mics. So I was like, if I need to get around, as my partner says, she's like, you're doing this utilitarian thing, and I love it. And
Yeah.
everything can fit into a fanny pack. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like a photographer.
I have one. I tried it out one case for all my gear, and there's multiple cameras in there, but for the most part, if I can't fit in this case, that means it's too much. So yeah, I like that approach.
Yeah. I got to be agile. I go to these cons on occasion as well. And, again, it's sort of the authenticity thing where you come there, like, I don't really like influencers or deem myself as an influencer in that way. So if I go to like a con or anything, it's about being able to not get a sound bite, but be able to get something that doesn't feel daunting. So if I'm
Right.
trying to talk to someone really quickly and I can pull out a quick lav mic or something like that, and it's not a whole production, you're able to get a good conversation without the person feeling like, what media outlet is this? So it doesn't feel weird. It doesn't feel like too weird.
Yeah. Which mic is your go-to?
I have really liked using the Rode. I think it's like their Go Live mics, the pro ones. I
The
like
little
using them.
square things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I did my Artscape interviews with those. Was when I first tested it out. And what I use right now, I'm using the Shure, I think 55S, the Elvis mic, and
Yep.
this was a birthday present a couple years ago when I was bougieing it out and staying at the Pendry. My partner was like, "And here's a microphone for you." I was like, "Girl, you guys."
Wow. He's a keeper.
100%. She's like, "Yeah, talking to the mic." I was like, "Yeah, sure, you got it." It's not
Wow.
anything.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's rad.
Yeah.
I have, it's funny because like, I for a while thought that I would really want to do video and I can still, do it. Audio is the reason why. It's a big reason why I don't enjoy shooting video. It's because like I always mess that up.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's other reasons too, but like audio, I'm like, I'm not good at it. Like, it's just one more thing that like I have to test, and it's just for me, it sort of just breaks I guess the camel's back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that yeah, we're on sort of opposite sides of it. Like I'm curious about visual, and my sort of midpoint of having the visual, having video is having snippets of this, right? But it's not the full production. One, it's budget. Two, like I can, as really a skinny entrepreneur, if you will, I'm able to control and do audio. I can edit the audio. I can run all of the aspects of it without necessarily having another person because people aren't available at times. And I suppose if I was more aware of audio in that way, I mean of a video in that way, maybe I would do that. but I kind of like doing both of them. Something's off with the wiring in my head. I was like, I can't do both at the same time. Something's off.
Yeah. Like my ADHD only has like certain, it has like a limit, I think. Like I always, I tell my girlfriend all the time, like I'm best when I do two things at once. But there's something about adding like in my whole process, like I can shoot stills and I can shoot video, but if I add audio to it, that's it. It breaks me.
So moving into, 'cause I want to hear a bit about sort of I want to go backwards, I guess. So creative industry, I am reading that you've been in the creative industry for over 20 years, right? And, as I touched on earlier, I'm coming up on 16 years as a podcaster. And I think about those early interviews. I was like, I was bad at this and marginally better now. So you started off graphic designer, right? And then creative director. That's, I'm curious about you, Tice, the way you guys think. And, there's brands I see you talked about certain car brands. You talked about like video games, PlayStation and such. How is your like journey shaped your creative approach like now, like with the different like plates that are out there, photography and even some of the other projects that you're working on? How's that experience over those 2 decades really help shape how you go about work now?
Yeah. I mean, obviously being a graphic designer, that certainly helps what I do now. I remember when I was in college, I went to the Corcoran, which is now, I think, GW in DC. Um, and it got to a point where I had to pick my major, and it was either going to be photography or graphic design. And I decided I went to go graphic design. I don't really remember why. It was a long time ago. But yeah, it launched a great career. Started out as a very sort of like, design, composition, color, all that sort of, very sort of tactile, sort of mindset. And then back then it was, I'm going to date myself. The internet wasn't big yet. So, I was doing a lot of like print and like dealing with papers and all this sort of stuff, which was really awesome. I actually missed that a lot. But you sort of start to climb the ranks a little bit and you get sort of separated from your craft. So you go from, a designer, somebody who's very has a lot of intention, who has a purpose, to like a manager who sort of, helps guide the purpose of other people. And then, yeah, then you become a director and, essentially you're even further removed. And it's been wonderful because, working for ad agencies, working for these clients that we have, it's really taught me what premium really is, like what a team of 20 to 50 people can really do,
Yeah.
which is fascinating because like my bar for quality is super high. Because normally, we have 50 people to do a single shoot. And then it's odd now being on my own and shooting just by myself. If I'm lucky, I'll have one assistant. But for the most part, I like the fact that it's me. But what doesn't change is my eye for, the small details, the quality, the bar and everything. It's still the same. But how do I achieve that now that I'm by myself? I
Sure.
think that's kind of one of those things. And do I want even that level of quality? Like, is it okay that things are a little bit messier than I'm used to? Is it okay that things are less polished? Knowing that, it just came from me and not an army of people. So I deal with that a lot, like the dichotomy of it all. I still go to my job and, work with a very talented, great team of people. But then, on the weekends and at night, it's just me by myself again, So I love the duality there, but it is a struggle at times.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I want to comment on that one piece before I move it to this next question. Um, there is a thing like I'm an Aquarius, so perfectionist over here, and I run into this thing where I had to come to this realization. I used to edit all of my podcasts, and in this 16 years, right, or soon to be 16 years, I had a network. It was one distinct podcast coming out per day. So I had 5 different podcasts on a given week, and I was the editor for all of them. and having all of the other stuff that I was doing, right? And being very fine tooth comb with it, looking for those ums and all of that stuff.
Or,
And, once I handed it off to my, great editor, my great producer, Daniel Alexis, I, you know, I had this realization. I was just like, and I would give him notes and whatever the manager thing, right? Sort of give
Mhm.
notes and so on, but mostly he gets what I do. So he keeps the conversation feeling like a conversation. And with that, I noticed in my approach at the time when I was at my most like meticulous and really sort of looking for that perfection, I'm removing the elements, the spaces, and the sort of imperfections that make a conversation feel like a conversation. And I
Yep.
was like, that effort has now moved it away from what it is. So now it's not even what it is.
Yeah.
And once I came to that realization, I was just like, oh, unless there's something goofy that said, because I like to make myself look good. I don't care about the guests. Y'all can look bad, but if I make myself look good in the interview, make me sound good, Daniel. Make everyone else sound mid. I'm like, that's that's sort of the extent of the editing. But whatever that, cleans up the audio and it feels like this is a cogent conversation and there's some meaning and some intention in it. All the other stuff, I don't care if I say I don't care if I flub a word. I flub lots of words. This is why I do my introduction in post now, because I flub it a lot. So yeah, I think sort of having a standard and having sort of what you're reaching for and knowing what you're reaching for, that's in my head at least. I call it this sort of a approach of pre-editing.
Yeah.
Like sort of to help with the guest for sake of argument, instead of just you come in blindly with no context of what we're even going to talk about, send the questions over beforehand. It makes for an easier conversation, or chat a little bit beforehand, because there's nerves on
Yeah.
this side all the time. So I can only try
Same.
to empathize that there's nerves on the other side. So to quell some of that versus you go into it and you're not even comfortable yet. And as soon as you get comfortable, you're 20 minutes into the conversation and it's been a lot of, you know, flubs and a lot of sort of those ticks that are in conversation when people are nervous. So yeah,
Yep.
it's sort of like that's been the approach, and that's all driven by having this goal of what do I want to listen to, what do I find interesting, and what conversations do I think are cool.
Yeah, I agree. There's such a thing as too polished, and I think I'm learning that and I'm dealing with that a lot. Like sometimes I'm shooting and I'm just like, I'm not making an ad. It doesn't need like, am I trying to, take a picture or am I making an ad? So it's really interesting, because like what is art? I think that's what I'm trying to deal with. 'Cause, again, very uncomfortable with calling myself an artist right now. So like I think that's the inner dialogue I always have. Like, am I just an ad guy with a camera, or is there something more to me, as I'm taking these pictures? So like, what is the definition of what I am right now? I think is something that I always deal with. It's a conflict that I always have.
Same, same.
Yeah.
I'm just like a guy with a microphone, just a jerk with a microphone, D-list celebrity here. That's what I call it. So let's talk a little bit about AKQA, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I read that the mission is to create a future for our clients.
Mhm.
How do you balance sort of this in your role? How do you balance sort of this forward-thinking mission, which is a mission that I dig, with your own like professional creative work? Like, what excites you most about like those projects and those opportunities to work with clients?
Yeah. AKQA is, they were part of almost a revolution in advertising where, back in the day you had your Don Draper, these very traditional advertising, and they essentially all they did were print and TV ads, and that's pretty much all they did. And AKQA and companies like AKQA came along and redefined advertising. They were born through the internet, so things like CD-ROMs and which I know sounds archaic, but that was a new sort of avenue of advertising. But websites, banner ads, and then websites got cooler and more amazing. Flash technology happened, and AKQA sort of rode that wave. So it was always in our DNA to be innovative, to kind of be the weirdos in the room because we weren't traditional advertisers. And I think that helped because, we were always looking for a different way of doing things. We were always trying to be first at something, which was pretty awesome. Like, I think we were the first, to put a car in an app. And now, cars are in apps all the time. But like, I remember we did that for Volkswagen. It was like unheard of. Like, wow, there's a car in a racing game, and like, nobody thought to do that first. But I think what was always great about AKQA wasn't the kind of the hype or the novelty of being first was enough.
Yeah.
It was an agency that really devoted itself and still devotes itself to a level of quality and refinement and beauty that, sort of is intrinsic. We have offices all around the world. And the one thing I think that binds us together is this like sort of, camaraderie when it comes to like, we're going to do this and we're going to do it very well. So I think those are the things that, have sort of been planted into me is this idea of like, if you're going to do it, you should really do it, like don't bother unless you're going to do it well. And then also like try to be innovative, like take a look at the landscape, look what's out there, draw inspiration from it, but try to do your own thing, So I think that's, I've been there 15 years. Those are the sort of the spirit that I want to sort of carry on from I guess my day job, if you want to call it that, or my career
Yeah.
into my work outside of that.
Yeah. And thank you for that. Cause I'm definitely be picking your brain after this. You know, I've recently tried to explore this idea, that Maya concept, most advanced yet acceptable, and all of that stuff, or what have you. It's like, oh, this is just this play on this thing that we already know. And, even getting into this spot of building out sort of like decks and design and how I'm presenting and pitching what I do, because we don't really like things. We like things that feel innovative, and we want to do these things that are innovative. But a lot of times, folks with money, they just want something that's a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. So, in thinking through it, I always do sort of these really high level pitches of what I do, and it's like, all right, how do you bring this down that is digestible for someone who gets it on this level, but may not get it as the way that you're seeing it? So, just trying to understand that, because and as I, touched on, which is a little bit of a segue into this next question, but as I touched on before we got started, collaboration, like collaboration is a big part of this. And, you got the intake form. It has a few questions in there, and I try to use that for vetting again to see who's interested, because there are times where some of these PR people who are trying to get their client over, they'll reach out, yeah, I'd love to be on your platform. Say, have you listened to it? No, at all. It's like, why are you so interested in it? And sort of all of these different elements that are in there. So I have these questions that are sort of required, and because I want to have something that's good for the people listening, good for myself, firstly, like, am I interested in the conversation? And good for the guest, and then ultimately good for the person that's going to listen to it. So I want this to be a win-win for you and I in this scenario, and then whoever's listening, maybe they're getting something out of it from, hearing pieces of your story, or maybe the way that the conversation goes. And that's the way that I sort of look at this. And, that's one of those things that is baked in, when I think of sort of this collaborative effort. But it varies. It varies at times. And I think that collaboration, and even now, sort of in this spot that I'm in, where I've been doing it for a while and teaching as well, that's now mentorship. That's another thing that's sitting there. And so to talk a bit about like sort of mentorship and collaboration, and sort of your work macroly speaking.
Yeah, mentoring is it's interesting because like a lot of us are, and there are amazing podcasts on this already, so I won't try to replicate them, but a lot of us are really, especially when you're a designer, a photographer, an artist of some sort, you're an individual contributor. And we are sort of born from doing things on our own. And then you get thrown into this environment where you have to work with other people that do the same thing as you sometimes, and then oftentimes they don't. Or you have clients that do other things. Um, and you're asked to function, in this environment. It's tough, and then what role do you want to play in that? So, just because you're a great individual contributor, and oftentimes people equate that with seniority or, experience or something, and then that's supposed to make them a better manager. The two actually don't relate, so they're completely different skill sets. Just because you're a great graphic designer or photographer doesn't mean that actually you can lead graphic design or photography. So I think I learned very much the hard way of being really bad at it in the beginning of what it was to be a mentor. Like you selfishly always want to do it yourself, because you feel like you're going to do it better. You feel like, there's too much on the line to trust another person.
Sure.
And what you kind of come to the realization is you don't trust yourself as a leader yet, so that just takes time and takes practice. Some people are innately really good at it, but now I can say that I can lead, I can mentor, I can kind of pass on information, and I can trust myself to do that in a responsible way, in a way that actually guides another person's career, project, whatever. But yeah, it's a tough process. Again, I'm super jealous. Some people are just naturally great leaders. I had to really fumble a lot to try to become a decent one.
When you were describing it, I immediately thought of whatever reason I thought of Jordan, thought of Michael Jordan. Just like you're not a coach, like you're great as an individual contributor, and you can't just take your talent and insert it into someone else. And we saw
Right.
that instance, right? Since you're a DC guy, you saw that instance when it's like, I'll come out of retirement, I'm going to play for the Wizards. It's like, are you sure about this, bro? All right, quote Kwame Brown. All right, you got it. And it's sort of that. And I've tried to get better at that in doing this. Like this is for the most part, it's very much driven by me. And I have sort of contributors that are coming in, as I mentioned with my producer. If I have an assistant here and there, and I've had several different assistants for smaller pockets of time. And I catch myself at times initially when I'm like, okay, you're really good at that. Maybe you're not as good as this in this area. And it's like, how can I give you more so this fits? Because the only reason that the person may be there working is just like, I can't do all of it. This is why I don't do film, don't do video. It's like I can't be in front of the camera and behind it.
Right.
So it's like kind of taking that away. And it's you really hit the nail on the head is sort of you don't trust yourself yet. And you don't have a lot of confidence in yourself. And that's what it was coming from. And I have one person I'm working with now who's helping with this newsletter, and we have really good conversations, and I'm able to just flex sort of what my vision is and, my marketing background and the communication side. And she's like, yep, yep, yep. Cause she's a communications person with a marketing background. So it aligns and she gets it and it works out really well. And
Yeah.
that's just a trust thing, and having, sort of, like I said, 16 years overall, but the last 5 years doing it in this way with so many different people that I'm interviewing, it's just like, I don't waste your time. So, being able to think about things and maybe bring in some folks to kind of help me get this word out there better. It's just like, I can't do all of it. I can't clone myself. I'm good at the things, but it's just like you're less efficient when you're trying to, you're spreading yourself too thin.
Yeah. And it certainly helps when you work with somebody who's super talented too, like I think that always, makes being a leader a lot easier, and also, makes you look good for sure.
Yeah. So here's the last real question. And I think this aligns really well. I looked at an old interview or maybe Q&A that was out there. I believe it was something in it. You're not a big fan of sort of that short form social media style advice. So with that in mind, I also don't like the short form. I
Yeah.
call it brain rot. Maybe it's my age I'm showing. But I like that sort of meaningful advice, something that's actionable and things of that nature. But what advice, most meaningful professional advice have you gained, over your career that you probably want to share with someone who is interested in photography, who is interested in sort of exploring, other areas or, interested in design? Just a piece of advice that you have either heard or you would just share to someone that's young in the field.
Well, I mean, that's a tough question because, like, as much as I say like the whole rapid fire short form advice, I dislike that because I feel like it's easy to write a headline, and it's harder to write, an essay on something. Um, and I think it all wraps around being honest with yourself, and it's one of those things where you just got to really know what you want out of your work. Um, and, if it's just to make money, that's fine, like that is great, and then you design your life around doing that. You design your work around doing that. So if you're here to make money, and then just know that that's your purpose. And there's no shame in that. If you're here to make art, then make art, but just know that like it's hard to do multiple things at once. Keep it simple. So if you're really truly going to be honest with yourself, you have to, and nobody else needs to know about it, like you have to tell yourself, I'm out to do this, and everything else is secondary to it. They're all nice to haves. But set a course for yourself, and always that is your North Star. You can redirect at any given point, but make sure you have a North Star, because in today's day and age, there's so many avenues that you can go. There's so many things that you can do. And I think this is important because like even what you say, you're like, we know our limitations. We're not trying to be 15 things at once. It's important to dial down to one thing and be really good at that. And if you're somewhat okay at everything else, that's fine, but be really good at one thing.
Well said. Thank you. That's a good spot to close out on. You said you didn't have a short version of it. That was succinct. That was good. That was really good, actually. It sounded like something I said earlier today, which is why I'm so happy.
Look, I rambled.
No, you're great. You're great. Hey guys, Rob Lee here, chiming in the middle of the podcast, and we'll be right back to that in a moment. But I wanted to remind you that if you're following me on Instagram, and I hope you are, The Truth in This Art, make sure that you explore the links, the link in bio. I know that people always talk about follow me, link in bio, and all of that, but there's some valuable stuff in there, such as a survey for my newsletter. You've probably received the newsletter, and if not, definitely sign up for it. There's some interesting stuff there. We have profiles on certain guests. We have sort of curated episodes because we're around 800 right now, and it's a lot to go through, and all of them won't be available on every platform all the time. So being able to revisit and go back there to check out those episodes is important. So definitely check out the survey. Let us know what you think of the newsletter and what you would like to have included in there, and continue to make this podcast yours as well as mine. And yeah, back to the podcast, rapid fire. I now have a fifth rapid fire question, so I want to knock these out with you real quick. All right. I'm going to go with the one that sounds the most professional because it may have been the top part of the podcast, but I wanted is like sort of a quicker answer. So wide ranging set of skills, what have you, and experiences. How do you keep pushing yourself creatively? What's that one thing that you're looking for, that North Star, maybe, if you will?
Wow. I think right now, oddly enough, my career is doing well. I always want to do great work there, but like since we're talking about my art, if you want to call it that, it is essentially finding my style, my voice, like I don't want to say shtick, but yeah, my shtick, and it's starting to take shape. I'm starting to like, have a look and a feel to my work. But more importantly, I think I'm starting to develop a ideology behind it, a way of approaching it, a way of thinking about the problem that is before me. And I think I really want to develop that. I don't know if it's quite there yet, but like it's fascinating. It's like I don't know, I've been doing design and I've been doing, directing for so long. Like when I picked up the camera, I felt like a kid again. It's just like I can create. It's terrifying, and I can make actually really bad work on my own because I don't have a team to help. And there's something exhilarating about that. This whole looking and searching for things.
That's good. That's good. I think that's a driver right there. I feel that vibe. I tap back into it on occasion. Each one of these interviews is not like I'm interviewing all visual artists. I'm interviewing all chefs. It's a glut. It's a lot of different folks, what have you, and each thing takes its different sort of requirements and sort of different requirements and different constraints and sort of different forms of like pre-editing and all of this different stuff, but it makes it fresh, keeps me curious and keeps it interesting. And I almost can go in each time like a novice. And it goes back to the thing like an artist book or any of these things of, the reason this works is I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So I can always
Yep.
get into it new and fresh.
Yep.
This one is actually I'm going to save the trolley one for like so creatively for PlayStation. What was one of your favorite games growing up?
Oh wow, there's so many. I grew up in the Nintendo Sega Genesis era. So
Okay.
uh, I think about Metroid a lot because it was so weird. Like for back then, it was such a weird like the character, the hero was kind of weird, and like all the different like enemies were weird. The quest was kind of odd. Um, I always come back to like how creative we were as kids because if you think about Super Mario, that was like what 20 pixels, and you had to imagine what those 20 pixels like. That's a guy with a sword and a shield and a hat and a bow. It's like, and now we have like all this amazing CG and everything like that, and we're like, oh, that looks fake, and like we don't challenge our creativity or our vision for it anymore, so like I think about me as a kid looking at like just a few pixels and it all made sense back then, but like now if I see bad CG, it's like really offensive for some reason.
Oh, how dare you? Why would you even
I
do that?
know. I know. Yeah.
I remember this game. We had the Super Nintendo back in the day and like standard Nintendo. And I remember on the standard Nintendo back in the projects in the early 90s, we had like that. I think we had like you would blow the
Yeah,
card.
yeah,
And there was one. I was a fat kid growing up. I was always tall, always big, but still a fat kid. And we had whatever this track and field game was with the floor pad. And my brother, my cousins, all much more athletic than me, they would smoke me on it. And I had thin disbelief. I was like, this is not even, you know what? I lost. I lost that race.
yeah. Yeah, I remember like just the blisters I would get from because like now if you look at Xbox, PlayStation control, they're so ergonomic, they're like sleek. Like the old Nintendo controller was just a rectangle and like it was not comfortable, but like I don't know, we played the hell out of it.
100%. What is your most recent Spotify liked song? This is going to be pretentious. I'll give you a moment to think about it. This is going to be pretentious and maybe a little goofy, but it will age me. Um, I heard in a video yesterday of some bodybuilding thing and on Instagram, and it was the theme music from Conan the Destroyer. And I was like, man, this is orchestral. I was like, I'm putting this on there. That's my most like. That's at the top of my liked list. And then I went down a rabbit hole. The guy that did the score also did the RoboCop score and Starship Trooper score. I was like, oh, I love this dude. This guy's great.
Wow. I have to look. I didn't realize it was the same guy.
Oh yes.
Conan was awesome. For me, I think it's interesting. There's, obviously there's a lot of new music out there, but lately, and I think it's because my girlfriend had never heard of The Cure. And would just come. I love The Cure, and would come on, pretty frequently. And she like it was consistent. She always liked The Cure whenever it came on, and it was really kind of exciting to introduce her to, some of my like favorite, emo, angsty, gothy music from back in the day. And what's great is they're actually coming out with a new album now, and so far they have two singles and they sound amazing. So I have to say I'm fairly excited. So yeah, The Cure right now.
I dig it. Gather your blouses. Let's do it. Let's just make it happen. Where's the eyeliner? Let's do it.
Yeah. Oh God, I look horrible in makeup, but I'll do it.
So here's the penultimate one, if you will. Busy week you've been touching on kind of battling the flu. Thank you for being a trooper, for coming onto this pod. What is a go-to meal when you've had one of those like busy weeks? Like you need something, it needs to be good, not necessarily healthy per se, but it just needs to be good. It's like I need something to hit. I need a comfort meal. What's that meal for you?
Oh man, I'm easy. Like it just stems all the way back to my childhood. Popeyes.
You get it.
And yeah, it's dark meat, spicy, mashed potatoes. Like that is always going to be and I don't want to say guilty pleasure. That is, I don't even have to feel that guilty about it. But yeah, I love Popeyes.
Okay. But just make sure you kind of, get enough, have a bev with you when you're having those biscuits. Cause I hear that they're dangerous. I hear they're dangerous.
I actually don't like their biscuits.
Really?
Yeah, I'm going to get a lot of hate mail for this, but like, I stay away from their biscuits.
Okay. I was in New Orleans years ago, and I remember someone popped over to me and they were like, "Are y'all Popeyes like ours?" And I'd had their red beans and rice at their Popeyes. I was like, "It is not. Y'all's is much better. You actually cook this. This was a thing that is there and it's good, but it's not in comparison to a Popeyes in New Orleans."
Yeah. Oh, I bet. God, I would love to, because are they still in New Orleans? Like, I know they moved out like after the big hurricane. Wonder where their home office is now. Anyways, sorry, I digress.
Here's the last one, and this might be the trolley one.
Okay.
What is your favorite carrot related dish?
Oh, wow. So yeah, I very much dislike carrots. It's if you are a friend of mine or even an enemy of mine, you probably know that. I'm trying really hard. So like over the past 10 or so years, I've been really trying to face that because there's no reason why anyone should hate carrots. But I am okay with carrots when they have been just roasted like beyond like recognition. Like I make a curry, I put it in there, but I have to let it cook for at least a few hours. Um, Carrot cake is somewhat okay,
Our
but
cake's
if
delicious.
chunks are too big, it's not going to work. But for the most part, anybody who just sits there and eats raw carrots, oh man, I can't. Yeah, I can't even watch somebody do that.
I feel the same way about celery. I was just like, why is this in the Trinity? Why is this here?
Yeah, celery, I can stomach. It's only carrots for some reason, and everyone's like, it doesn't taste like anything, or it's sweet. I'm like, I don't like it.
Actually, it's in the mirepoix, it's not in the Trinity. I was wrong about that. Yeah, yeah. I found that in the old interview, and I was like, I'm definitely going to ask him about carrots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is is it celery? That's the thing?
It's beets. I can't fade beets. I went to a birthday party last weekend, and we had a gluten-free chef, and she made a birthday cake for the person whose birthday it was, and it was very good, very moist.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Oh yeah, it's vegan, and it's this and so on, and it's gluten-free." And I was like, "What'd you use to get it so moist?" She was like, "Oh, it's a lot of beets in there," and I was just like, "Betrayal!" But
But
very
it
good.
worked.
It was
Yeah.
very tasty. Just I
Yeah.
didn't know it was in there because I would have threw it into we were in Fells Point, so I would just threw it into the water. A fish can have it or whatever lives in there. I don't care. I don't care. Um, so yeah, that's that. And that's also the sort of podcast. So you're off the hot seat. We're done. We're wrapped. Um,
Sweet.
so there's two things I want to do as we wrap up here. One, I want to thank you for coming on and spending some time with me and during the podcast. This was a lot of fun. It was a lot of, great chatter, great conversation, great gems. And two, I want to invite and encourage you to share with the listeners where they can follow you on social media, website, anything that you want to plug in these final moments. The floor is yours.
Nice. Well, I'm easy to find. Instagram is probably the best way to keep up with like my work and whatnot. My handle is at yes Jefferson, no space and anything like that. So yeah, come find me, DM me, talk to me. I am always up for a great conversation.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Jefferson Liu for coming on to the podcast and sharing a bit of his journey, his background with us. And for Jefferson Liu, I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, and community in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.